Rocco Cozza, welcome to Succession Stories. I'm so excited to be with you today. Our blues look amazing
Yeah,
together. Look at this. We couldn't have coordinated better.
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me.
Two of us from Pittsburgh. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and your firm?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been practicing law 2 decades now. And when I came out of law school, I worked in one of the big law firms. Then I went in-house and I was general counsel of a international IT firm for 14 years. So it was a great transition into the business world. I ran the legal department, got to travel the world, got to actually practice law differently, where I was really advising one business in all aspects of that business. So was with them for 14 years, went through a lot of different management changes. And finally in 2018, I decided I wanted to resign. I didn't enjoy corporate America anymore. I wanted to go off on my own. I resigned in 2018, consulted with that company for about a year. And then July 1st of 2019 is when I incorporated my firm. I had been practicing law kind of part-time for small clients, but July 1st, 2019 is really when I decided I want to grow this thing. So it started as me as a solo practitioner. Now we've grown, we have 10 employees, 6 lawyers. We have, probably 400 plus clients. And our law firm, we're a business law firm. So we do everything from startup to exit planning. We work with startup businesses to Fortune 500s. We handle their commercial litigation, employment, IP, and then we have a whole other piece where we started doing estate and legacy planning, which we found that, we saw a need with our clients. They were business owners that haven't really thought about that, their legacy planning, their estate planning. So we brought on an attorney to really handle that practice area. And that's been growing substantially over the past 6 months. And, we have a great team. I started the firm really because I wanted to do things differently. Being at a big law firm, working in-house, I saw what big law firms did wrong. So when I started the firm, I asked people in business, I said, what don't you like about lawyers? What don't you like about law firms? And I just said, as long as we don't do those things, we'll be okay. And in the end, our goal as a firm is to give our clients peace of mind. Like that's what we really sell. We provide legal services, but in the end, it's my job and the firm's job to give our clients peace of mind.
People don't usually associate lawyers with entrepreneurial spirit. And on this show, however, I do enjoy speaking with attorneys who understand the ethos of entrepreneurship because they
Yes.
work with entrepreneurs, but also for you as a founder, you are the entrepreneur. So good for you for taking that risk, making the leap and starting your firm. And I think the mission of the business is spot on. When
Appreciate
you
that.
work with clients,
Mhm.
one of the things that you and I talked about at lunch, which was such an
Yeah.
interesting, fascinating topic, I think, is this idea of business legacy.
Mhm.
And it's nice that we're both local and could have had that over, over
Yeah.
a wonderful lunch. Let's bring that to the show. Let's
Okay.
talk about business legacy. When you work with clients on exit planning and
Yeah.
transition, and that's a big topic for me and a
Mhm.
big topic for the show. But what does that mean to them most often?
Well, so let me start by saying that most often they're not even thinking about it. And that's the scariest part, right? Because they spend all this, and I'll kind of give you a customer avatar. Say we have a person, late 40s, early 50s, started the business, has kids, been running the business for 10 years. When I start that discussion with them, their immediate instinctual response is, well, my kids are going to take it over. And 90% of the time, that's not the case. Because my response is, well, have you talked to them about it? Do they want to do that? Or are you just making this assumption? Because there's a lot of things you have to think about, right? When me as a business owner, right? I started this business. This is my baby. I've built it from the ground up. I look at it a certain way. And when we're working with clients, they look at their business a certain way. And they have this pride in it. And so we have to, one, understand like what is the end goal they're trying to achieve? Do they want to create a legacy and somehow keep within their family? Do they just want to exit for a bunch of money? Do they want that exit to provide generational wealth for their family? There's a lot of different pieces to it, but in most instances, the clients aren't even thinking about that. It's a conversation that's kind of kicked down the road. And it's my job to, to stop and pause the client and say, let's start planning for this now, because planning for an exit when you're exiting is the worst time to do it.
Let's just underscore that.
Yeah.
Planning for the exit when you're exiting is the worst time to do it. I couldn't
Yes.
agree more. Do you
Yeah.
think that owners are fearing the unknown? They don't want to think about it. They're not familiar with it, so it's easy to kick the can. Or is it a taboo topic?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, right? Because when you think about exiting a business or coming to the end of something, we're talking about our own mortality. And no one likes to do that, right? Like when even when you're creating your own estate plan, right? No one wants to have that discussion because we all think we're invincible. We all think this is going to last forever. I'm 45 years old. And do I think the end is in sight? No, but I have to plan for it because there's so many unknowns in this world. The economy can change. I could be in a horrific accident. There are so many things that could happen. And I think there is this fear, this inherent fear that business owners have that because again, a lot of them think that if I talk about it, I'm speaking it into existence. And they think if I just don't talk about it, it's not going to happen. Well, that's the wrong way to approach it. Like, plan for these things, think about them. And I don't want to say necessarily it's a taboo topic, but it's an uncomfortable topic for most business owners because you've built something and now you're talking about what happens to that thing you've built when you're no longer there.
Do you think that the phrase business legacy helps people think about these topics a little differently than exit planning or retirement or, whatever the other options could be, death,
Yeah.
right?
I do. And that's why we use that topic because, one, just take estate planning versus legacy planning. When people hear estate planning, they think, oh, I'm planning for when I die. Legacy planning is I'm planning for my legacy to live on past my death. It's just a different frame of reference. So business legacy planning, to me, I think just strikes a different chord with clients because exit planning means I'm done. There's an end, right? Legacy means I may be done, but what I've created will carry on. Like that's how I look at my firm. Like I want this firm to live on way past my death. So I'm looking at the legacy we're creating long term, not how I'm going to exit the business someday. And I think when you frame it that way to a client, it's a more palatable discussion and they're more inclined to open up and really think about what that legacy is.
That's a good jumping point. What are some of the questions that get people to open up?
Yeah, I mean, so one, when I meet with a client, I always try and read the client to understand one, what type of questions I should ask, because every client's different, right? One that I found that really helps them open up is, what do you want people to say about your business when you're no longer here? And it's kind of just that very basic question they've never really thought of. And it could be, I want people to say he or she treated his employees well, or they built a great product, or they changed an industry, or they changed the world. So when they start thinking about what people will say about what they've created once they're gone, that's how I typically open the discussion. Then you can start probing a little bit. Because if they say, hey, I want people to say, I treated my employees really well. Okay, well, why are your employees so important to you? How do you treat them now? What would you want them to, how do you want them to carry on your legacy? Maybe then it becomes an ESOP plan. There's a lot. So you kind of got to take that conversation, take those answers, and that really helps frame that exit planning discussion one way or the other.
Yeah, I find that as well. If you can get people to think about things outside themselves, take the separation from the business, and the
Yes.
legacy is really the sustainability of that entity for their employees, for the community, for stakeholders that they care about. And that helps, it helps give a runway.
Absolutely.
As we talk about you and your company, you mentioned it. Have you given, you're only 45, right?
Yeah.
But have you put a timeline out there with clients and for yourself to say, hey, general rule of thumb is, 10 years out, 5 years out? I get asked this question all the time.
Yeah.
What do you find is a good rule of thumb for your clients? And then what are you thinking about for yourself? Just to give a little case study here.
Yes. So for my clients, I always tell them if you're thinking about it inside of 5 years, it's too you didn't give yourself enough time. A minimum of 5 years out, because depending on how you're going to do it, you may have to restructure things, make sure the things you have in place are in place and in place over time. So I would say a minimum of 5 years. Hey, if we've got 7 to 10 years and we're thinking that long, that's even better. But a lot of times, again, getting a client to open up to that discussion is hard. When you finally get them to that point, they are thinking about, okay, like, what am I going to do next? So I say we got, in my mind, the minimum of 5 years, 7 to 10 is great. For myself, honestly, like and they joke about it here that they call me, I'll be the old man coming into the office when I'm 80, but I truly love what I do. I love the firm we've built. I love what we're creating. Like, I don't see myself ever exiting. I see myself maybe slowing down 30 years from now, but we're just getting started. Like, we're 4 years old, and we've grown, we're growing 50 to 60% year over year. So I'm in the excitement phase. Now I'm still looking at, like, we're doing some strategic planning now, like, okay, as we bring in different partners, how do we structure equity? So if in the event I do, we just 10 years from now say, you know what, I'm done. How do I get out? But that's not even on my radar at this point.
Well, I love that you brought up strategic planning, because that's where I've been focused a lot with
Yeah.
clients, as my starting point was coming
Hmm.
out of corporate America and finding that I had a skill in strategic planning
Hmm.
and working with smaller companies to help introduce the tool and the practice, because many of them, would have a napkin and or not write things down at all.
Yes.
And then over time, that practice has evolved as I merged it with transition planning. And so the
Hmm.
process of strategic transition planning should make sense to folks, right? Why do you
Hmm.
need a strategic plan for your business? Well, because we
Yeah.
need to work on things, we need to align our people. Absolutely. Let's think about it the same way on the transition planning side. And if it's 5 to 7 years, well, shouldn't
Hmm.
we start the process on what are all the things we need to do? And it's
Yeah.
hard. And that's why I think my audience likes this show, because I
Hmm.
bring people on like yourself who have a different skill set than they're probably used to working with. And when it comes time to bring in the right people, we need
Hmm.
we need to plan, we need to plan for that and plan ahead. And I know you like collaborating. When
Yeah.
you're working with a business owner that's a new client,
Hmm.
what are some of the things that you like to, where you start? You started with this conversation, and then
Hmm.
moving from there, what are some of the, let's call it contingency planning, if you will, to help them reduce risk in the business? What are some of those first things? If you say, yep, first 6 months of when we're working with a business owner client, we need to reduce risk. What are those things that you look at?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Again, every business and industry is a little bit different, but if I'm taking kind of a cookie cutter approach, we're always going to look at how you're structured, right? Is your foundation built correctly? Meaning your entity, your governance documents, all of the legal framework that your business is sitting upon. We got to make sure that's done, because you'd be surprised at how many people have formed a business online years ago, and now it's a $20 million entity, and they don't have some of the basic fundamental agreements they need, that if something goes wrong, that protects them. So we do that first. And then we say, okay, we need to understand your business. So I'll sit down with the client and say, tell me about like, what do you do? What do you sell? What service do you provide? Tell me about your clients. Tell me about the industries. And so then I need to look at what are the risk levers right there. If you're in a high tech industry, is there data privacy risks? Is there cybersecurity risks? If you're in construction or industrial, there's different types of risks. So I want to understand that, right? That framework and that landscape. Then I say, okay, how do you engage with your clients? What are the contracts you're using? What are the agreements you're using? We need to look at that and make sure, one, they're buttoned up as tight as you can never have 100% ironclad agreement. If an attorney tells you that, they're lying, because there's no such thing. But our job is to make it as tight as possible. And then to look at it. And then what I'll do sometimes is go through that contract and actually ask the client, do these things actually apply to your business? Because sometimes they'll have old contracts that someone else may have put together, or they found online somewhere that half of the document doesn't even apply to their business. So they overcomplicate things. So we look at that. And then the last piece really is if they have employees, looking at how do they engage their employees? Do they have the right policies in place? Are they following all the laws they need to follow depending on where they're located when it comes to employment? How do they treat their employees? Like, how do they communicate with their employees? Because these are all the biggest risk areas, dealing with customers, your foundational documents, and dealing with employees. So we kind of do that. We'll call it a health check of the business. And that's really that first part that we do when we work with new clients.
Gotcha. Couple additional questions for you, and we'll
Yeah.
start to round down the discussion here.
Okay.
Lately, I've been thinking a lot about regrets and how business owners can exit without regrets. In your experience, what do you see as some of those success factors?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Again, success factors are different per owner, right? And it's one, understanding what those are. It's to someone, it may not be money, right? It may not be a large lump sum. It may be, hey, I've created a sustainable business that'll live past me. I have the right next level management in place to take over. Or hey, I made enough money from this business to fund my family for the next 2 generations. So those success factors, they're very individualized, I believe. But if I take all the clients I've worked with, it really boils down to probably 2 or 3. It's one, did I build something that created enough wealth for me? Meaning I put all my eggs in this basket. Like, I didn't really do anything else. So did I put enough effort into this where it actually created the wealth I was trying to create? The second piece is, did I create something that's sustainable past me? Meaning this will live on with what I've built and the people that I put in place. It'll live on past me. And third, and again, this is kind of a qualitative thing, but it's, did I enjoy the process? Because I think a lot of business owners have regret. Like, when they look back, they say, I just did it for money. And there wasn't any passion behind it. I didn't create anything sustainable or that benefited the bigger world. And I think that's a big regret I hear with business owners. They did it just for the money. So I think if they can look back and say, yeah, I had fun doing this and I was passionate about it, like, that's a big success factor in my mind.
Are there any standout stories? You'll hold the names, of course.
Yeah.
On either this scenario worked really well for the family or this scenario just did not, that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably more of a horror story than it, because I mean, success stories are great, but this is the one. It comes down to making the assumption that your family is going to take over the business. I'm thinking of a particular client. This person, ran a great business, was very involved. Kids were working in the business, and the assumption was they're going to take over, but the kids were planning on doing something else. Like, they were planning on, hey, sell the business, I get a payout, I move on and do something I'm passionate about. And that conversation came to a head, and it was not a pleasant conversation, and it really caused a wedge within the family. And that's unfortunate, but it was something and that's why I say you have to have those discussions up front, because if you're making an assumption without validating the assumption, it's going to lead to exactly what it led to, a tumultuous conversation that really caused some strife within that family.
And what's the learning there? If you were going to rewind history with the owner, what could they have done differently?
Plan for the exit from the beginning. Like, if it is truly going to be, if it is something you want to build to stay within your family and you want your kids to be involved, you need to have that discussion right out of the gate. The moment they step into the business, that discussion needs to take, is this something you want to take over? Because you'll operate differently. You'll get them involved in different things. And instead of making, like, never assume your family or your children or even your employees are going to take over. Owning a business and working in a business are 2 completely different things. It's easy. Like, if I had a family business, it'd be easy for me to work in that business, right? I'm working for my family. Me running that business where I have the responsibility of all these other families, totally different environment. And having those discussions very early on is the biggest piece of advice I can give any business owner.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about things that
Yeah.
business owners can start doing to be better prepared and have the business legacy that they're looking for. If people want to reach out to you, Rocco, to get in touch,
Yeah.
what's a good way to learn more?
Yeah, you could go to our website. It's just cozzalaw.com, COZZALAW. You can always email me there. My email is just rcozza@cozzalaw.com. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to what I always say, I'm happy to just chat with someone. If they want a second opinion or just want to pick my brain. Like, we don't charge for consultations. I'm here to help in any way I can. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat with any of the business owners out there.
Thanks, Rocco. Thanks so much for your time. Listeners, be
pleasure.
sure to follow. Thank you so much. Listeners, be sure to follow Succession Stories in your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. Leave us a review, 5 stars, helps the show get discovered. To learn more about maximizing the value of your business and planning for transition, sign up for our newsletter at thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com. You can also book a complimentary call with me. Join us next time on Succession Stories for more insights from transition to transaction.